Welcome back. The date is the 19th of August. It is a Monday again. I actually filmed this video for the second time. I filmed the entire video about an hour ago and rewatched it and realized that the audio was off the entire time. The microphone died. So this is my second time filming this video. Um, and for today's topic, I wanted to talk about something that's been on my mind for a couple weeks, and it has to do with international slash global decline in birth rates. Might be weird. You may be thinking why I'm talking about this, and it's because I've just noticed a lot of headlines and taglines recently in the past couple of months relating to this topic. Every news article, every publication, every journal, uh, has some kind of paper or publication relating to this. And this has been a popular topic for centuries. For any of the listeners that are aware of Malthus, who is like a very famous epidemiologist slash researcher slash philosopher, he popularized the idea of overpopulation being a problem, and that's kind of been the consensus for a lot of people for centuries now. I think he it became popularized in the late 18th century. So yeah, I wanted to talk about kind of just like speculations and some of the theories on why there are supposed global uh, decline in birth rates, why it could be incorrect. So I'm going to be talking about some interesting statistics, observations, then move on to current efforts and interesting case studies on some of the efforts that some countries have taken to try to reverse decline in birth rates, and also some potential reasons for birth rate declines. Um, Lastly, I'm just going to talk about future implications of global population decline. And the first thing I wanted to say is that it is a bit of a fallacy that there is a global birth decline. The global population technically is still gradually increasing year by year. Um, what's decreasing is the population growth of developed countries. Uh, with that said, the continuous population growth is comprises of just 3% of the developing countries that exists in this planet. Um, which is why people that tout this idea have a kind of distorted or skewed perspective. Um, so, and I also thought this topic was interesting, like I said before, because the consensus was that, overpopulation is a problem. So it's interesting to see how the pendulum has kind of swung the other way. Um, so to start off, I'm gonna start by defining what the replacement rate is, which is just the fertility rate that's needed um, for a country to maintain steady population growth and to not remain stagnant or decline, excluding factors like emigration, immigration, and that rate is called the replacement rate, and it's 2.1 children per woman in a country. Now I'm gonna read off some stats on fertility rates from mainly from like the BBC, Statistics of Bureau, from various countries like Korea, Japan, as well as the CDC. So, the UK actually has a fertility rate or birth rate of 1.49 children per woman. By the way, if I do look away, it's just because I do have some very like glossary notes I'm going to be looking at. The EU has a birth rate of 1.5 children per woman. Japan, 1.26 children per woman. And South Korea has the lowest of 1.72 children per woman. So, as far as the trend that most developed countries go through in experiencing population growth and economic prosperity, typically in more developing countries, uh, younger generations, younger populations comprise the majority of the nation's population. Um, and as it becomes more developed, lifespan increases, quality of life increases, and so the older population tends to grow, whereas younger populations tend to decrease. Families have people have less families, and so younger populations, younger generations uh, decrease, and there is a heavier burden placed on the worker or proletariat demographic of people in a country to stabilize or to support the pension working group or the elderly class. And you can see that in countries like Japan and Italy, where elderly populations now form like a significant part of society, leading to, like I said, smaller workforce and growing pension burden. And the trend is emerging now in the U.S. and in the U.K., despite having some of the highest immigration rates. Um, so what are some of the drastic projected declines? Again, I'm reading these from statistics of Bureau from various countries. In Japan, it's expected to see a 30% drop if there aren't like major interventions made by 2070. In Korea, South Korea specifically, it could face a 50% drop by the end of the century. And South Korea is interesting because they've experienced a lot of economic development just in the past few decades, really. Um, in the early to mid 20th century, they were essentially a developing country. They were struggling. Uh, and a lot of that has to do with like the direct investment that the U.S., the trade deals that the U.S. has with South Korea. But it's interesting to see just how drastic of a change can happen in a few decades. So we're going to move on to the next parts of this video, which is going to be some of the interesting current efforts and case studies that some countries have attempted to reverse population decline and some of the potential reasons for birth rate decline. And before I go into this, obviously, I'm wearing different clothes. And the reason is because I tried, the space on my phone just ran out yesterday. And so it stopped recording. I didn't even realize. And I tried re recording the rest of it, but my phone needed to reboot and it just took a while. So I'm finishing it on this day. Uh, so, um, The first interesting government intervention I wanted to talk about was Japan's. They initiated this intervention called the Angel Plan over a decade ago, which was aimed to boost birth rates through better childcare support and parental leave. They increased maternal and paternal leave for parents having families, and it had some initial success. Eventually, it plateaued and it proved unsuccessful. Hungary also had a similar plan to Japan's called the Family Protection Action Plan, which was similar, introduced financial incentives and housing subsidies, resulting in like a notable increase in birth rates for the first couple of years, but again, it plateaued. Um, what's interesting about Japan's case, though, is that afterwards, just in the past few years, they implemented this initiative to get foreigners to come in and essentially repopulate their country by again providing financial incentives to do so and subsidies to make it easier for said people to start families. Again, it's kind of too early to tell whether or not it's going to be successful, but the overall trend of significant efforts that countries have taken in the past decade to reverse population decline have been insignificant. Obviously, China is like a very famous example of like having the one child policy of trying to reverse or reduce the population. That was so successful that they undid it. It was initiated, I believe, by Mao during his rule. um, so obviously, uh, you know, repopulation is definitely more is proving to be more difficult than reducing the population. So I wanted to talk about a bit of some of the speculations as to what are some of the underlying causes of this supposed global trend. Now, one of the more popular kind of general um, speculations is that it's just a natural I guess progression of prosperity and modernity as a country goes through the the process of becoming an empire, of becoming prosperous and economically successful, different priorities change as lifestyle changes and as economic prosperity in the nuclear family increases. People's lifestyle choices could change. Although I think this speculation is kind of broad and dismisses some of the more economic issues. Let me sneeze. We'll see if I'll cut that out. Probably won't. Um, So yeah, another thing is the cost of living. This is something that I resonate with more so than these other speculations. Just living in the Bay Area, um, with the average apartment cost or studio apartment being around like $3,000, and even in secondary cities surrounding the Bay Area, um, obviously it's very difficult to maintain the support of a family, let alone yourself, with those standards. And this trend is not specific to the U.S. It's relevant to major metropolitan areas and developed countries around the world. The other two speculations have to do with women's expectations, increased expectations of women to perform in the workforce. Obviously, when you have increased career opportunities and economic progression for women, um, there's less of a priority in attending to families, and it becomes much more difficult to do so, especially in those first few years of life when a country doesn't really prioritize offering, family assistance or maternal leave. It just makes it an uphill battle to even attempt to start a family. Um, yeah. So of these most there's obviously a lot of theories as to why it's happening, but of the ones that I resonate with, um, it seems like the cost of living is the most direct reason. Um, but again, it's only theorizing. For the last part of the video, I wanted to talk about some of the future implications of population decline. What will the future look like for these global superpowers, um, given this trend? So, first off, let's talk about the economic consequences. For younger generations, you'll have decreased investment in education and development because resources are going to be redirected to support an aging population. And I talked about this earlier in the video with an increased reliance on support of the pension population, but a reduced um, just percentage of the worker or proletariat class. It becomes increasingly difficult to support the older class, the older population. And so creative means of doing so need to be developed. And one means of doing so is through technological adaptation. Obviously, um, LLM based models like ChatGPT and Bard and Gemini have become like incredibly popular just in the past couple of years. And when you have increased reliance on AI and robotics, it's going to inevitably lead to a compensation for a shrinking workforce just to maintain productivity. And if a robot can, you know, be 10 times as productive as a single employee, as a single worker, why would you invest more in the younger generation than AI technology? um, Another interesting implication could be just geopolitical shifts uh, and changes in global power dynamics. When nations with rapidly aging populations struggle to maintain their influence due to that skewed population demographic, uh, their military capabilities weaken as well, and their ability to be, um, effective and commanding on the world stage diminishes. So their geopolitical power does as well. Lastly, um, one of the future implications are just changes in cultural and social dynamics and values. Um, small In family structure, smaller families and aging societies would lead to significant shifts in just general social norms and cultural values. Now, I can make an entire video just dedicated to this, but this video alone has gone a little longer than I expected it to. So I'm gonna end it here. Uh, yeah, let me know for anyone who's watching what you think about this topic. If you have any thoughts, ideas, anything related to that, just leave it on the comment section. And I appreciate you watching. All right, see you in the next one.